On the heels of a contentious election, one question remains on the minds of many. How will Donald Trump's victory impact the U.S. economy? Whether you agree with his policies or not, his economic approach has been a focal point throughout his political career. In this video, we'll break down the potential economic impacts of a second Trump term, exploring everything from taxes and trade to jobs and national debt. So let's dive in. Let's start with tax policy. During his first term, Trump championed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, which lowered corporate tax rates and offered individuals tax cuts, particularly benefiting higher income earners. If he wins again, it's likely he'll pursue similar tax cuts or even expand them. Corporate tax rates were slashed from 35% to 21% under Trump's previous tax reforms, making the U.S. more attractive for businesses.
No tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our seniors. And I'm announcing a new policy today that I will support a tax credit for family caregivers who take care of a parent or a loved one. It's about time that they were recognized, right? If Kamala Harris gets 4 more years, our economy can never recover. As we rescue our economy, I will also restore our borders. There's never been anything like it.
A second term could see a push to permanently reduce these rates, which may incentivize more corporate investment and expansion. The benefits for businesses could be significant, leading to more job creation and increased economic growth in the short term. However, critics argue that these tax cuts disproportionately benefit the wealthy and large corporations, potentially exacerbating income inequality.
We've got a lot of questions for you here, beginning with this market reaction. This is a monster move to see a day in which the Dow's up over 1,000 points, the S&P 500 is up some 2%, but the bond market is moving in the other direction. We're looking at a 4-5 here as of this moment on the 10-year. What do you make specifically of the reaction in the bond market? This is clearly in anticipation of some sort of inflationary event.
Well, here's the thing. When I was talking with investors and clients, as I do, that's most of my day job, the simple question is, what happens if Harris wins? What happens if Trump wins? And my initial read in very simplistic terms was Harris, bad for equities, good for bonds. Trump, good for equities, bad for bonds. And that related to the fact on where I see growth and also how the market initially would react to things. So, for example, with Trump, equities are up because the market's more excited about growth, lower tax rates, less regulation, et cetera. But the bond market gets worried about more spending, tax cuts, et cetera. And like the CBO, for example, they're going to initially probably score a Trump budget as being, more deficit-related spending. The Tax Foundation found that. The problem with it is that we don't know the specifics yet. And I'd argue if you look back at the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017 and you see what CBO scored, the revenue numbers in 16, we actually got the money in 18. In other words, the tax cut paid for itself. So I think these are knee-jerk reactions, and then we'll see what happens once we get some meat to the bone.
Trade policy is another area where Trump's impact could be felt strongly. During his first term, Trump engaged in trade wars, most notably with China, imposing tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods. If he's re-elected, expect more of the same, with tariffs likely to continue as a tool for pushing American interests abroad. While some argue that tariffs protect American industries and jobs, others claim that they lead to higher costs for consumers and damage relationships with key trading partners. The potential for new trade deals, especially with nations like China, could offer economic benefits. But trade wars carry risks that may ultimately increase inflation and disrupt global supply chains. Job creation is a cornerstone of Trump's economic strategy. His administration focused heavily on deregulation, which he argued would make it easier for businesses to expand and hire. If Trump wins again, it's likely we'll see more regulatory rollbacks aimed at boosting industries like energy, manufacturing, and construction. On the plus side, deregulation can help businesses grow, and a growing economy can translate into more job opportunities. But there's a downside. Critics argue that rolling back regulations, especially in areas like environmental protection and worker safety, could harm long-term public health and the environment. The job market could see significant growth in sectors like construction, energy, and manufacturing, areas that Trump has historically supported. However, it remains to be seen how these gains might balance with potential job losses in other sectors, like technology and clean energy, which could suffer under less regulation. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, national debt. Trump's policies, particularly tax cuts and increased government spending, have contributed to a rising federal deficit. If he were to win again, the budget deficit could continue to grow.
My first budget will be submitted to the Congress next month. This budget will be a public safety and national security budget, very much based on those two, with plenty of other things, but very strong. And it will include a historic increase in defense spending to rebuild the depleted military of the United States of America at a time we most need it. And you'll be hearing about that tomorrow night in great detail.
As Trump has indicated, he would keep cutting taxes and ramping up defense spending. The concern here is that high deficits and a growing national debt could lead to higher interest payments and eventually impact the government's ability to fund essential services. Critics warn that this could undermine long-term fiscal stability, but Trump's administration has argued that tax cuts and spending initiatives will stimulate economic growth enough to offset the rising debt. Inflation is another key issue. With tax cuts and increased government spending, inflationary pressures could rise, especially if demand outstrips supply in certain sectors. If inflation picks up, the Federal Reserve might raise interest rates to curb it, which could affect everything from mortgage rates to consumer spending.
Inflation is causing stress. Bad news about prices in the grocery store.
Historically high inflation.
In 2022, much of the world experienced a period of uncommonly high inflation, with the US, UK, and Eurozone all peaking at around 10%, meaning that prices, on average, were a full 10% higher than 1 year before.
Higher interest rates could slow down borrowing and spending, potentially cooling off the economy. While this might be a necessary move to combat inflation, it could also lead to reduced consumer confidence, especially for people carrying debt. When it comes to the stock market, a Trump victory might continue to generate optimism among investors who favor his pro-business policies, including tax cuts and deregulation. During his first term, the stock market saw significant growth, and many investors believe his policies benefit big corporations and the financial sector. However, trade wars, tariffs, and the unpredictability of his administration's policies could keep some investors on edge. The stock market could be volatile as a result of both domestic and global uncertainties. And thanks for watching. Remember to leave a like, share, subscribe, and hit that post notification bell to keep up with our new content.